So Stephen is a very seasoned IT cybersecurity leader, which when we're talking about cybersecurity leadership, that includes compliance, risk management, crisis and disaster management, among others. He's supported and led efforts across the healthcare, academic, financial, and government sectors, very focused largely on the health sector, where he is right now. He previously was at IBM, Watson Health's Government Health and Human Services Leadership Team. And currently he's the CISO, as I mentioned, of Renown Health. He also teaches part-time cybersecurity at Harvard. The course is Cybersecurity Managing Risk in the Information Age course. And I don't know if I did you justice, Stephen. Please add anything else as far as your background, but welcome to our podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. And no, you definitely hit all the key points. I just recently started at Renown Health. Prior to that, I was with U of L Health. So definitely have been, in the healthcare industry, both on the payer and provider, as you alluded to with the IBM Watson Health team, supporting our Medicare, Medicaid clients, but also with McKesson, and then Common Spirit, which is formerly CHI too. So, a lot of background in healthcare.
Stephen, well, I just want to say thank you so much for your time and also your support of our podcast, for your invaluable feedback, as well as your guidance through that class that we had together. So with that, I want to actually kind of dive into your career path. I want to ask you, how did you get your start in cybersecurity?
Well, that's definitely a great question. I know in cybersecurity that definitely people have varied backgrounds and career paths on how they got there. So I actually started trying to go the law enforcement route. That I went to Washington, D.C., thinking that, I'm going to start doing some enterprise risk management. I'm going to, really start to dabble into some stuff as I was finishing out my master's degree. So as I did that, I was doing enterprise risk management, continuity, and that's really as cyber risk and a lot of that stuff was starting to emerge. So again, that was when the digital transformation really started to kick off. We were moving a lot from paper and, different technologies into more connectivity and, where we've come from the past 10 years into that. So they're like, well, we'll give the millennial cyber. So they're like, we're going to start looking at components of that. So it really grew off of that because enterprise risk used to kind of own that. And then, they work closely with IT. So that's really evolved over the past few years into, its own little core subject matter within many organizations. And we're seeing today it's continuing to evolve with the various landscape that we had. So I really came up the business risk side. I know there's others that come through the technical side that have been in, IT as system admins, engineers, and all of that. So it gives a different perspective on that. And I think it's really been valuable and important, not only, coming through that mechanism of being on the business side, but also on the consulting side, because CISO, the importance of that is, really getting business buy-in, speaking to the executive leaders on really the importance of the overall program, the risk, and then how you complement the mission of the organization. So I think that was a great career path, at least it has been for me. So that, again, any route or, path people come through, can really make you successful. I have a lot of friends that are, technical background that have come from law enforcement, that have come, different traditional routes. And I think that gives people different lenses on what they're able to see and how they're able to strategize from a security standpoint.
Wow, that's really interesting. So you started out with pursuing law enforcement and moving to enterprise risk management. Now you're the Chief Information Security Officer. So what would be a career advice that you would provide or offer to someone who's actually starting out in their career, cybersecurity journey?
Well, definitely be a sponge. There's no background that is, doesn't fulfill this, because again, security is, really meshed into the dependency on technology within any organization and, supporting the business. That if you come from finance, if you come from IT, which we see a lot of people from the technical side, if you come from intelligence, if you come from the risk management compliance wing, again, utilize that to really just build out your end goal. But I think that that varied background is very important, and try to learn as much as you can, because those are key stakeholders and really support you in the cybersecurity strategy and operations that you do in an organization. So I think that just there's such a shortage in security. So really, again, just showing that passion, trying to go in and learn as much as you can, getting supplemental education to that. I know certifications are a good way to go in there and dive in and really find your niche and what you want to do, because there are different business tracks within cyber. So, there's a technical route, and then obviously the business side of the house that, puts you up more for the management side. Of course, everybody needs those engineers, those threat hunters, IR guys, but again, also the more managers, directors, and, root up to be a CISO. I think that's more on being focused on, your soft skills, strategy, how you're able to be tactical and strategic, and then, really looking at all those intertwining pieces within an organization. So, definitely don't be afraid to fail, get whatever experience you can, because again, there's so many entry level positions and, new opportunities that are opening up in cyber. So I think just getting a combination of varied experience, education, and then, really just getting your neck out there, get an internship, do mentoring. There's a lot of opportunities to get your name out there and really get your foot in the door to do that. So.
Well, that's great information for anybody pursuing a career in cybersecurity. We know there's such a gap and there's such a need and there's such an emphasis right now on cybersecurity. Do you feel that people should move forward if they're interested and pursue certifications first, or would you recommend going for a master's?
Well, that's a great question. Because again, there's different certifications that I guess go more with the technical or business route. I like to keep those two buckets. I think education's super important, that to really drive off of that, because then that shows you have the, acumen and, have you the technical or the cybersecurity understanding, the fundamentals. So then based on what you want to do in cybersecurity, I think I would really try to get involved in that first to really choose what you do, instead of just get, 100 certifications to have the bumper sticker business card. There are more tactical certifications you can get, like the CISSP is really the gold standard, but that is very technical heavy. But there's also the CISM. That's what I only have that one. So there's that's more business focused associated with that. But then there's the HCISSP now, that's like a healthcare specific version of that. Then there's like more governance, risk and compliance, and then you get more into the technical auditing side of the house. The Security Plus is a great one to get your foot in the door, of course, with that. So I think it's kind of having a good mix of both, but I wouldn't really say, the more the better. But again, you really want to have a good understanding of where you want to be in your career. If you want to be more the management or stay in the technical side of the house, because that really can help drive on, those complementary certifications with that. And you can go out and look at different job postings, which there's tons of them for cybersecurity, and really, look at the requirements of those positions. That's what I did when I was kind of putting together my various pieces to say, okay, this is what it requires of 10 years in this kind of field. So how do I go about obtaining that experience? What kind of certifications do I need to look at? A master's is almost required nowadays to, be a director and above. So, really looking at that and then building your, career roadmap off of that. So that's really what I did. And not be scared to, start and just get your foot in the door. That I started as an intern, and then, really worked my way up to do all of that. So you never know what opportunity will come within an organization, depending on their maturity level. So
I'm going to move on to another question for you, Stephen, moving outside of career path. You mentioned how the cybersecurity landscape has changed and evolved. So this is going to be a little bit of a broad question. How has the cybersecurity industry evolved since you started coming through the business side? I know that's a loaded question, but probably there are big things that are making it such a heightened, important area and focus across the world right now. So what do you think has changed the most?
Well, we've always had computers. I think we know, I got the background from, being at my time at IBM. But, I always like to say that with the evolution of the cell phone and everything else in technology, we're so interconnected. And the digital transformation has really made almost every aspect of business associated to technology, from, doing finance to, supporting patient care to, marketing to, I mean, we can order food now with DoorDash to, at the snap of your finger. So as you see that everything is so interconnected now with that growth of technology and, really enabling better end user experience and doing all of that, of course, comes more risk. So again, the more technology, the bigger the attack surface, the bigger opportunity for that. So I always like to use the example when I'm explaining that to, my leaders that, it's like a 1-lane highway versus 6-lane highway. The more cars, there's more, they're more at risk to getting in an accident just out of pure volume. So that's really where we've gotten to now. Everything's so interconnected again from a technology standpoint that again, COVID-19 also was one of that. A lot of organizations were forced to, really fast track and expedite their digital transformation strategy with that by sending people home. So, it was one thing from a cyber hygiene perspective to protect everything within your, inner walls, but then you expand people out to working from home, working remote. That was really a new concept for a lot of organizations and opened up a lot of, various risks for that. So I think that was a good thing and a bad thing for some organizations that, weren't properly prepared with a, cyber strategy. But again, that it's really just our dependency on technology, and that's going to continue to grow. We're seeing that in healthcare. I know, every industry is really jumping to do that. That I think it's over the next 5 to 10 years. We're still seeing, this new race to, quantum computing. So that just means that, dependency on that AI, really how we can make our lives easier. That's going to continue to just, fast track over the next, 5 years. So that's going to just expand the importance of having a solid cybersecurity strategy and practices in place for various organizations. So.
Yeah, so the growth of all these things we're seeing, AI, Internet of Things. I mean, all of our homes are interconnected devices. What do you see based on that? What are the biggest threats right now? So you're speaking out there to consumers. Let's focus on consumers first. What are the biggest threats? What do people need to be concerned about the most? And bigger picture, what are you seeing out there that's trending in the industry? Because we're all getting phone calls all the time, and through AT&T, it's flagged as a risk call, and all kinds of scams that are out there, and it's just growing and growing. What do we need to look out for, and what are those big risks?
Well, being the, not only the CISO of my day job, I also am the CISO of my friend group too, because a lot of them have experienced their accounts being compromised. So that's a very real thing, that not only do we try to teach good hygiene at work, but also try to tell our employees about good hygiene practices at home. So it's kind of like washing your hands, a lot of that. So password hygiene is huge, that, you can't use things that are easy to guess. Like my friend's a swimmer. You can't put like swim 1, 2, 3, or put your dog's name and post all your pictures with your dog. So it's about, using complex passwords, using multi-factor authentication, that your banking apps, the DoorDashes, your Instagram, Facebook, all of those things now have 2-factor authentication. So that's another level of security that you can set up to really better protect yourself if somebody gets your information from a third-party breach. So again, with us being so interconnected, you have your food apps, you have your Amazon account, you have your Target app, you have, all these various other merchant accounts that, again, you're putting in banking information, you're putting in your home address, you have your medical records. So, as you really think about this, there's a lot of personal data out there about us. So again, the better you can protect that by using different passwords. You can download free password vaults to really store your passwords. I know Apple phones are great about that, storing your passwords for you. But again, if you're doing that, make sure you have a lock screen and some kind of security controls that people can't. If you lose your phone, that somebody doesn't have the keys to the castle on that. But there's a lot more emerging technologies, and I think that's a strategic initiative of a lot of organizations to push security hygiene down on their end users and consumers as well, with offering, you should update your password, or we had a third-party breach, maybe you should go change XYZ. And banks have always been on the forefront of that, because of course they can lose, thousands, millions of dollars in a matter of seconds associated with that. So it's also baking in privacy too. I know that GDPR is hot over in Europe, and we're starting to get like California Shield and components of different regulatory concepts here at the state level, but there's been a lot of discussion about that from the federal government acting on that. And I think with the landscape, that's also going to drive additional legislation that I've seen. I know we've already seen the Biden administration put in some executive orders and other pieces to really drive cyber policy. There's the CISA, there's the 405D that I'm a part of with on the healthcare specific side that are all government groups that, are focused on, pushing out good practice. And as we saw, the CISA had just recently came out saying like two-factor authentication is a high risk method if you're not using it. So I think there's going to be a lot more of that on people trying to educate, the people at home on that too, especially now that we have our Googles. I know when I say Siri, she's going to start listening. We have all of that. There's so much, like you said, we're so interconnected at home that we need to take a lot of those practices that an organization would to also secure our house. That, that is something on the top of minds of a lot of my friends that are, new mothers and all that they have all these digital cameras that they can do XYZ, that they'll actually look into those specifics. They'll ask, questions. So I would definitely recommend, for people to do their homework and or have the resident CISO in the friend group so that you're able to go through and, really have a personal cybersecurity plan outside of what a lot of organizations are doing.
So do you feel, so on the password front, don't save your passwords in a Word document on your computer or just in your notes on your, iPhone or wherever, use password software, right? Have a vault.
Yes, like the iPhone has really brought that to the forefront and that they're saving that. That's a password vault in a sense. So again, that we'll see people in the hospital side that would write, which I get, just because there's so many disparate systems that they'll write their passwords down and have a password book or write them in a notepad. But there are technologies, free technologies out there to do that. So that's really step one of keeping a bad actor, out of any kind of your accounts, is doing that.
So I want to touch on specifically to the healthcare industry. What are some of the emerging threats besides ransomware that you've seen pose the greatest risk to the healthcare industry this time?
And what I think makes healthcare so unique is our attack surface. So we have medical device, we have IoT, and then we also have our day-to-day tech associated with that. So again, that just makes us, our attack surface grow just based on what we have to do business. And of course, technology is expensive. MRI machines are multi-million dollars. So medical device equipment's, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I think that IoT and medical device security is one of the, biggest risk. It's been an emerging risk for a while, but it's really come to fruition a lot with our dependency on that, our interoperability, information sharing, and a lot of legislation that's requiring us to have all of these systems interconnected. But again, it's because of aged infrastructure as well, that, hospitals and healthcare, while they make money, they're not, don't have the same financial means as, like a Bank of America or a Facebook or something like that. So again, we have to have 3 to 5 year plans to do hardware refreshes. So that means there's a chance or a probability that, there's end of life equipment out there. So that's what we're seeing a lot of, a lot in the industry. There are compensating controls you can put in place, and that's really, putting together your cybersecurity strategy. But I think that's one of them. And of course, having healthcare was never a industry that had remote workers for the most part, but COVID did, push that out, that we'll have, radiologists reading, pharmacists, obviously IT, finance, a lot of the supplemental support services. So I think that also opened things up on not necessarily having a secure remote access strategy. So again, that's something else just to throw in the mix of just having that, those multiple devices, legacy hardware, and really embracing security basics. That's what I always like to say, that if in healthcare and in any industry, if we did security 101 very well, we've talked about password hygiene, two-factor authentication. It's crazy we still talk about that in 2022, but that's, those two key fundamentals. Security training and awareness, and then we still see as phishing as the most effective attack vector within any organization. So there's a lot of tools out there for email security, and of course in a fast-paced environment like healthcare, to bring that back, as you're having the doctors care providers and other people just going through quickly on emails. It's, you know, that's really our job as security professionals to, you know, better train them for signs to look at or put in technical compensating controls that helps mitigate human error. So we know there's always going to be human error. There's, you know, our front line of defense. But yeah, there's a lot of good tools out there now that we can help mitigate that. But again, yeah, healthcare is just a very dynamic environment, just based off of all of the technology. And then also opening that out now to, you know, like Epic MyChart, you know, having people able to have their records, you know, making sure that that secure connection from the patient and the consumer in is also protected. And of course, all of the third party vendors that healthcare organizations work with. So.
Great insight. So we know that healthcare and the financial industry, as well as manufacturing, are three specific industries that are being targeted, I would say, the most right now, right, by hackers and foreign nations. Can you tell us and tell the audience why is healthcare and finance and manufacturing? Well, let's start with healthcare. Why are hackers and threat actors the most interested in those verticals specifically?
Because of the wealth of data. If you think about what you have to give when you walk into a doctor's office. So, I mean, there's the 18 key identifiers under a safe harbor. So if you just think about the 18 different fields that you need to protect and make sure that are protected under that, just in healthcare alone. And then you go to banking, think about when you fill out paperwork to do a loan. And then, you know, think of all these various other industries that if they are able to steal that data, of course, so there's, I guess, two different avenues from that, you know, first they can resell that data, you know, for identity theft, black market, everything that we're associated with, you know, the wealth of data, but also cyber attacks that, you know, we're seeing ransomware is very profitable for these organizations. There's ransomware as a service now. And that's just because a lot of these organizations have to pay, because you can't shut down a hospital forever. You can't shut down a bank. You can't, you know, a lot of these organizations are mission critical to consumers and their communities. So if they don't have strategies in place to mitigate this with a quick recovery, that, you know, in turn, they're going to have to pay or they'll go out of business. So that's really why they're targeting them, from the wealth of data and just knowing that they are, you know, part of the critical infrastructure of our country. So that's just why they're targeting them. They'll pay, and it's been profitable for them so far. So,
and they're able to make money and get a high profit off of personal information relating to health data, specifically on the dark web, right?
Correct. Yeah, there's just, so much information between healthcare and finance. I think that has some of your social security, your date of birth, your, the treasure trove of information that they collect, just as part of the record for them to be able to identify you.
It's scary. It's scary.
Yeah. So it's like you call in, that if you don't have that information, they're going to say, well, who's Andy? Like, you need to tell us the last 4 of your social, all of this information. So again, that's where organizations need that to confirm who you are, but also, that just, gives a honeypot for threat actors to want to go after that, to sell it and use it for a malicious means. So.
Right, which is why we need more cybersecurity professionals to be able to put those measures in place in all the different verticals, especially those that are being highly targeted.
Correct.
You also mentioned regarding having a strategy in place and also business continuity. What are some of the components that a firm needs to actually work on to be able to come up with a strategy or have a good business continuity plan in place?
So it's really important to, I know the new buzzword, cyber resilience, because the old traditional business continuity, disaster recovery, the continuity sides, of course, how's the business going to continue operations, and then the DR is recovering the technology. So the cyber resilience is the new buzzword from a specific cyber attack. How are we going to continue operations? So it is important to understand your organization's critical assets, and then have a plan for what is dependent on technology, and also what is third-party supported, and really have that ecosystem mapped out, because then you're able to put together a defense in depth strategy. So from a technical side of the house, that's what a lot of traditionally people have showed, the castle with the moat and the walls and all of that. I like to say it's an adaptive defense in depth. I like to use the model of Kevin McAllister in Home Alone, the wet bandits or the threat actors. He, had multiple, things in place to try to keep them out of your house being, your crown jewels of the organization. So really putting that strategy together, but there's not a lot you can do in this day and age to be bulletproof. So, I mean, you can spend multi-millions of dollars to do stuff like that. But then if you share a password, you leave a laptop open, then, people have access in. So again, there's some great pictorials on that I've always seen on LinkedIn on that, but it is important to have a recovery strategy. So the mitigation side, early detection is key. I like to always make the reference to healthcare, that you go and see your family practice provider to really do preventative medicine. The earlier you can detect something, the less likely you are to have to go in and do any surgery or eradication of removing something out. So kind of using that healthcare model in cybersecurity has been really helpful to help, educate various users on that. But in the event something happens, directly to your question on the continuity side of the house, it's important to have backups. It's important to understand, what is mission critical to your organization and what can continue without technology, or if there's workarounds. Can you document on paper? Can you collect stuff in spreadsheets? Is there workarounds that you can do associated with that? So that's really important, of putting that together, bringing your key stakeholders together from different sectors within the organization. It's not just an IT issue. Cyber risk is a business issue. So it's again marrying technology, people, and process all together to have that comprehensive strategy.
And then Stephen, as far as, because your background and expertise includes crisis management, what would you tell businesses as far as a response strategy, response time? What are the key things to think about and to do? Because we have seen some of those infamous case studies out there and situations where companies have not responded in a timely manner and they've damaged their brand, their reputation, there's been financial loss. What would you say to businesses if there is an incident? What do you need to do? What are those steps you need to do straight away?
Well, the best way to do that is kill two birds with one stone. So I'm a big proponent of doing tabletop exercises with the executives. You have your CEO, your COO, all of the players at the table, and say, this just happened, what are we going to do? Not only are you going to be able to bring it real, in real time to them to have to get those real time decisions, but you're able to then fine tune your crisis management plan for that. Do you have marketing ahead of that? Are you going to go to the media? Are you going to, what is our strategy to address this, not only internally, but externally to those stakeholders as well? So having a great crisis management plan is, again, really just ensuring that you know who you need to talk to, when you need to talk to them, and to, I guess, boil that down a little bit from a technology side on having your incident response bucket of hours with people. So we've seen a lot of organizations that have been hit with ransomware that don't have any agreements in place. So that's essential to do that, so you don't have to do something at time of. So it's like having a fire extinguisher in your house that, you're not really planning on a fire, but if something happens, you have one, readily available. And then while you call 911 to be that supplemental support. So again, it's having those various practices in place, and also having offensive security measures. So I like to call it security assurance. So having your red, blue, and purple teams, as we call in the security realm, the rainbow, to have that to really poke holes in your gap and then bring those situations to your executive team, to have quarterly tabletop exercises to, again, say, this is a scenario that happened, or this event just happened, how would we handle this? Because again, that's a way that if you're more prepared, you practice for these things, that'll be second nature when you do that. So of course, as if an organization gets struck with a cyber event and they've never practiced, never have had these discussions, of course, you can think that that's chaos on, well, what are we going to do? Who's impacted? Who should we call? Having those predefined measures in place. We know every situation will be different, but again, at least having a methodology and then a baseline plan in place, and really a aware executive team on that too, that are willing to make decisions, on the fly to help get business back up and running. So
that's great advice. So just like we would do a fire drill, you need to do a drill, a practice drill in the event of a cybersecurity attack. And then part of that incident response plan has to be, how are we going to communicate out, like you said, to our customers or stakeholders, as well as internal employees, when the network could be down, right? How are we going to be able to reach out and connect with everyone in a timely fashion?
Correct. And that's like we have the VoIP phones, the voice over IP now. So it's like, what's your internal communication strategy? That's one of the biggest things. We see that on any after action report is internal communication. So your employees don't want to find out from the papers. So usually, having that strategy of that good internal communication and talking points, because, inevitably that investigative journalists are going to go out there and look for information that they can, and really telling people not to post information on social media, having that whole strategy for your internal and external facing crisis management plan is huge. So, and then, also supplementing that with your incident response plan on the technical side, as well as the business side on, how we're going to work with our forensic firms, how we're going to do a lot of those pieces while the business is on downtime. How long can they safely do pieces of that in healthcare? And then, really just baselining that and seeing where you need to invest based off of gaps and coverage associated with that.
To minimize risk going forward.
Correct.
So figure out how to fix it. And then a key thing is to communicate swiftly to consumers so that they have the opportunity to protect their own data, right?
Yes. And we see that. And I think that's something that's going to change. Requirements that some organizations and some industries aren't required to, disclose breaches. I know in healthcare that we have a requirement to OCR within so many days. But, other industry, I'm seeing that push that they are starting to make people do that. And I think that there was a bill out there for cyber specifically to that on letting consumers know, because you have the right to know if something is there so you can safeguard yourself, your information, look for any anomalies on people trying to open up accounts using your credit card. So I think it is a collaboration that, various industries need to not only think about what their internal strategy is, but to what we had talked about earlier on how we can baseline that back to the consumer.
And I think there's a feeling out there still among businesses that there's shame, embarrassment. We don't want to let people know there's been a cyber breach or a security breach and attack. They don't want to let people know right away. They want to figure out how to keep it under the radar and fix it without causing some sort of panic among their customers. However, by not communicating out, and to your point, by the media or anybody finding out, there could be such an enormous negative impact, far greater than if they were to just right out of the gates address it.
Correct. And that's why, part to go all the way back on the importance of having a good cybersecurity program and strategy, because it is a competitive advantage and protects your brand. So again, by having that IR plan, that continuity plan, all these pieces that we've been talking about throughout our discussion, that does better position you as an organization to how you're going to respond to that. Because inevitably, it's seen better if you let your consumers know before the media. So, that for organizations to be able to get in a place to do that, I think will go a long way for trust and, keeping people's business. But again, we've seen so many we didn't see anybody get off Facebook for their recent thing. So again, it's, also just, it's consumers need to hold some of these companies accountable to components like that. And I'm starting to see that come through with legislation and probably we're going to be in a lot better place moving forward, just because people are taking this seriously, just because of so many high profile attacks that we've seen over the past few months and years associated with this.
Well, Stephen, this has been such great information. We've covered a lot of areas, but really appreciate your time. You're an industry expert. Again, you've been focused on health industry, both teaching at Harvard, and it's been a pleasure having you on. We really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, Stephen. Well, thank you so much again for joining us and also supporting us. And we really appreciate the knowledge that you share with the community. So again, thank you. And we look forward to speaking with you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.